Hi, everybody. Thank you so much for inviting me, Amanda, and the amazing Campus Media team. I am thrilled to be here. So yeah, a slight change, I guess, in the program. So we're going to start talking about LinkedIn and how that can help you in your career and give you some really practical tips as well. So I should caveat this to say that my worst skill is timekeeping. So I'm going to try really hard to keep to time today, and Amanda's going to wave at me if I start going over. So let me just introduce myself real quick. I am Laura Fox. I worked at LinkedIn for 7 years, and I left in 2018 to set up my own LinkedIn consulting business. So I work with companies, large and small, as well as private individuals, helping them to get the most out of LinkedIn. And before I did this, I spent 10 years working in marketing and advertising, helping companies to hire and retain the very best talent. So my background actually was thinking about this as Melissa was talking. I never thought I was going to go into tech. Now, I was in marketing and advertising for years and years and years, and ended up that LinkedIn was opening their office in London and was crazy passionate about the platform already. I could see that it was really going to transform the industry that I was in. So when there was an opportunity to work there, I absolutely jumped at the chance. And suddenly I found myself as a tech person working for, a Silicon Valley based startup, which was, completely transformational for my career. So in some ways or another, without kind of necessarily thinking about this before I came today, I'm a tech woman too. So what I'm going to cover today is two things. A little bit about LinkedIn, and you're here already listening to me talk about LinkedIn. So I'm kind of guessing that you get it to some extent, but I think it's just really important to kind of set some context around what's happening on the platform today, because it's only becoming more and more and more powerful, which is great. And also share a little bit about my philosophy about how to think about it. I should probably move the slide on, shouldn't I? That would be a really good start. Okay, so let's see where we are. I've told you about me. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about LinkedIn, and then kind of the juicy stuff of the presentation is around some practical, actionable tips that you can implement onto your profile so that you have a really best-in-class profile that is going to set you up for today and for tomorrow. So just before I go into this first slide, what I'd love to do is, now I'm going to try and get this right. I think in the chat, we are going to post a poll. And what I'd love you to do is to put your answers to the following question. Very simple one just to kick off. I want to know how many people on here who are listening already have a complete LinkedIn profile. So how many people have got a complete LinkedIn profile? So just put that in the chat, and we'll keep an eye on that later on. So let's start talking a little bit about LinkedIn. So what is LinkedIn? LinkedIn is the largest professional networking site, social networking site in the world. So these are the latest figures, only released a couple of weeks ago, and they have just tipped 700 million member profiles around the world, which is pretty phenomenal, really. 26 million people in the UK, which you can see, or 29, right in the little bubble at the top. And actually, if you think about it, I had to check this stat with the UK national statistics. There's only 27 million people that are working. So where's the difference of that 2 million people? It's actually young people, students who are setting up their profiles in advance of leaving school or graduating to, I guess, future-proof their career and have a really great LinkedIn profile as they're coming into the working world. So that's really great. But other things to note is that LinkedIn has 50 million companies represented on the platform. So 50 million companies have got pages on the platform now. There are 20 million live jobs on the platform. And I'll share with you a little bit about my philosophy about how to think about jobs when you're looking for your next opportunity. There are 90,000 educational institutions who have pages on the profile. So if you're not connected to your own university page, if you don't have that section on your profile, I strongly suggest you add that in. I'll mention that later so that you get all the good news that your university may be sharing. And there are 35,000 skills listed on the platform, which is basically a really clever way for recruiters to understand who they're looking at and what they're looking for when they're looking for people. And the other thing that I thought was quite interesting, which is a statistic I read only this week, is that there has been a 50% year-on-year growth in the amount of content that is shared on the platform. So I remember when I started at LinkedIn in like 2011, I used to go to meetings and I used to say to my clients in those meetings, LinkedIn is going to become the biggest publisher of professional content in the world, because that's where we were going. That's what I thought was going to happen. And that's exactly what's happened. So now, if you want to be kept up to date with what's happening in the tech space, in engineering, in these sectors, LinkedIn can do that for you. You no longer have to source lots of different information from lots of places. It's all there on LinkedIn. So I'm going to find out later what the answer to the first poll question was, but my guess is that probably in answer to the question, who's got complete LinkedIn profiles, probably most of you. But what I'd love you to do is answer the next poll question, which is going into the chat. And that question is this: what do you think is the number one activity that people do on LinkedIn? And we're going to give you 3 options as an answer. Do you think it's this? A, applying for jobs. Do you think it's B, looking at people's profiles? Or do you think it's C, looking at news? So based on all the stuff that I said before, what do you think it is? Applying for jobs, looking for profiles, or looking at news? So put your answers in the chat and I'll let you know later on what the right answer is. Okay. So LinkedIn is not going anywhere. Actually, LinkedIn, since Microsoft acquired the site in 2016, is just becoming more entrenched in how companies do business. I mean, I have to say, during this terrible period of the pandemic and lockdown, I've never been busier in helping companies to communicate, whether it be for hiring, whether it be for marketing, because companies need a way to communicate with their audience, with their customers, with their partners, with their future talent, with their existing employees in a digital way. And LinkedIn has enabled them to do that. So it's not going anywhere. It's becoming more and more and more relevant and absolutely entrenched in the way that companies do business. So it can't be ignored. But the way that I would think about it, and kind of my philosophy, I suppose, it's super simple. And I think sometimes people overcomplicate it. You know, if you do nothing else on LinkedIn and you're not going to be going on there and active and networking, connecting, just have a really, really good profile, which is why that's going to form the content of this first presentation that we do today. You know, just having a best-in-class profile, like your personal shop window to the world about who you are in terms of your skills, your experience, the work experience you've had, that's all you need as a basic. Just have a really good profile. Because to answer the second poll that I asked you just now, what is the number one thing that people do on LinkedIn? The answer is looking at people's profiles. So yes, there is value, absolutely, in coming onto LinkedIn and adding people into your network and adding content. And we're going to talk about that in the second presentation after the break. Actually, what the heart of LinkedIn is it's a networking site. So your profile is going to be viewed anyway. Recruiters are going to look for you. You know, I've checked out all the people that are here speaking today to learn something about them before I even meet them. So I can see that Melissa's got an amazing profile and you should totally check it out. So people are looking for you on a platform like LinkedIn if they're going to be inviting you to interview, if they meet you at a networking event. So if you do nothing else, just have a really great profile. And I'm going to show you some tips on how to do that. And then the second part of the story is building a network, leveraging that, and actually sharing content, which is why we're going to cover that later on. So this is why just have a really great profile is the best place to start. So why don't we start there as well? So it's the ideal starting point for networking and building your presence in a professional world, whether you're a graduate that's, you know, soon to become a recent graduate, or whether you're starting out in your career, the profile is everything. So the high level view on what to do with your profile is you need it to tell a story. Now, your profile is not your CV, and you need your profile to be able to tell someone, without them ever meeting you, what you're all about. So you don't want to have any gaps in people's understanding of who you are and what you're all about. So you don't want someone to come onto your profile and for it to feel quite bland and boring. Not only do you need your profile to express your skills, your experience, your education, any work experience that you've had, all of those good things, but it's also an opportunity to express your personality. And, that culture and kind of values piece is really important to recruiters, as well as having the skills to do the job. So it's so much more than a CV. It's so much more than can what be written on a piece of paper. You've got so much interactive kind of opportunities on there to add rich media content. I'm going to show you how to do that because that's really important. So what we're trying to do ultimately is to create some standout. And so I think that's the key thing. So put yourself in the shoes of your ideal viewer and write your profile to them. So whether it be the recruiter for your next job, you're going to a networking event, think about what somebody who may come to your profile wants to see. And that's how you need to think about it. So where do we start? Well, to be honest, it starts right at the top. It starts with your professional photo and your background image. LinkedIn does have some data to say that if you have a really great photo of yourself, you will get 14 times more views than one that has either no profile or a poor profile picture. So having a really good picture is actually really key. And I'm really, really sorry. I know this is a STEM women event, but this is my nephew, Charlie, who I did a profile review for a couple of months ago. So Charlie's my nephew. He graduated from Nottingham University with a first-class degree in mechanical engineering, and I couldn't help but put his profile on there. Check out Charlie's profile. He's now got a graduate engineering job at Cobham. He's awesome, and he's got a great example of a picture there. Now I'm wishing I'd put Melissa Ahmed's profile up there because hers is also fantastic. But what's good about Charlie's profile is that from the picture point of view, it's a very simple head and shoulders shot. It's just him in the image. It's not done professionally. It's done with just a smartphone, but you can really clearly see the face, and that's what you want. Because when you're on LinkedIn, your profile picture is so tiny and it follows you everywhere you go. And so you really need to actually see. So sometimes people have, a shot from the waist up. Actually, you just want people to see as much of your face. And actually, believe it or not, there is LinkedIn data to say, sorry, Charlie, you haven't done this. An open mouth smile gets more engagement than a closed mouth smile. So a nice smiley shot of you, head and shoulders, ideally against some sort of plain background, is great. And also the background image. So if you've never changed the big background image, on the example on the slide, you can see a picture of a plane because that's what Charlie helped build. You will just have like a LinkedIn standard blue default one. And if we're thinking about creating standout, actually having a picture that's bright and vibrant, create some interest, might be a talking point at an interview, something like that, that's what you should go for. So I've seen all sorts of ones. A plane is great, something that inspires you. It might be a quote, something like that. But definitely have something in there as opposed to nothing in there, because that's going to create a bit more interest. So that's the pictures. Very easy to do. I should have said, just from a practical point of view, and guys, you probably know this already, but anywhere where you see a blue pencil on LinkedIn is where you can make an edit. So anywhere you see that blue pencil, click that. So this one would be near the top of the profile. So the second most important thing is to write a really fantastic headline. So the headline is the bit of space that sits underneath your name on the profile. And again, I've seen a lot of these, and sometimes people just have something that just says graduate of or looking for career opportunities in. This is a really fantastic opportunity to almost have like your own personal brand tagline. So to really tell a future employer or people in your network what you're all about. Because LinkedIn is a website and it is algorithm based, keywords are really helpful because we want you to appear in recruiter searches. So trying to have some keywords in there about skills that you have is helpful. I picked this example of Beatrice, who I got to know when I did some sessions, not unlike this one for Unilever. And I met Beatrice there and she's amazing. And she included, what I liked about her headline here is that she included the fact that she was a winner in this competition. She mentioned her master's that she did in international business. She mentions her university, which is very well acclaimed in her local market. So she manages to pack quite a lot of information into a very small space. So she, if I'm a recruiter, if I'm looking at her profile, I kind of really know what she's all about and I'm getting a sense of her personality as well. So you want to inspire someone to read a little bit more about you. So make sure you go in and change the headline to something that's a bit more meaningful. Okay, what's next? So we've done pictures, we have done headline. The next one is the summary. So I call it a summary. It used to be called summary. It's now just changed to be called the about section. And some people get a bit freaked out about this because it's kind of the first place on the profile where you've got completely free text to write whatever you want. And that can be quite overwhelming because what do you put in there? So the way I think about structuring the summary is, I don't know if you guys are familiar with the term elevator pitch, but it's something that we used to use a lot when I worked at LinkedIn, because you basically want to sum up everything that you're all about in 30 seconds. So imagine that you're getting into a lift with your ideal recruiter at that phenomenal engineering company, and you're like, oh my God, I know who that person is. And you want to tell them all about you. You've got 30 seconds to do that. So what are you going to tell them in that 30 seconds? And what I would tell them is probably these three things. What have you done before? What are you doing right now? And what do you want to talk about with them in the future? So it's kind of like past, present, and future. Really simple. If you break it down in that way, it becomes very easy to write because you only want to say 1 to 2 sentences on each of those three things. People don't have the attention span to read lots and lots of information. We all think about how we jump around a lot on a web page and we don't want to read a big long piece of prose. So it needs to be really short, sharp, give specific examples. Again, keywords, lots of things in there. Tell people what your skills are. Tell people what you've done. Don't be afraid to name drop. So if you've done placements, if you've done internships, if you've worked in industry, if you've had a part-time job, mention those things. So don't just say that you've had a career experience, that you've done an internship or a summer placement or so. Tell them who it was with. Tell them how long it was for. Be specific with the language that you use. It's almost like if you go for an interview and people say, tell us about a time when you ... and you actually have to give them a real example. Things to avoid would be things like buzzwords. So don't just tell people that you're a great team player or you're, really great at collaborating on a project or, those sorts of things. Those sorts of things are not searched for on LinkedIn by recruiters. They don't come up in searches. And it's more about showing the value that you have. So if you're a great team player, which would be a fantastic thing to include, give an example of maybe when you've worked on a project. So you could say, when I was at university, I worked on this project with a group of 4 other people where we did X. In that way, you're demonstrating that you're a great team player, not just telling people that you're a great team player. So your summary, your about section, keep it concise. Try and cover the achievements you've had. Name drop if you can. If you've had some work experience, mention these things. Stick to keywords and avoid the buzzwords. And past, present, and future is kind of a simple way to think about structuring it. So that's what I'd say. 40 words or more. At least, is kind of what you're going for, which makes you more likely to show up in recruiter searches. So yeah, very, very simple. Don't be afraid of it. It's okay. But that would be a really great way to kind of think about demonstrating. One thing to note, just as a side note, is that don't assume that somebody on LinkedIn is going to go to the top of your profile and methodically read all the way down. everybody consumes web content in different ways. We're all different. I might look at the top part of a profile and never read the bottom, or a recruiter might scan straight to the experience and education section and never read your about section. So don't be afraid of repeating information in your headline, in your summary, not necessarily verbatim. Don't lift the same sentences and put them into different places. But just don't assume that because you wrote something in the about section about that career opportunity that you did or that 6-week placement that you had, don't think, well, I've mentioned it there, I'm not going to put it somewhere else. It's okay. On a website, that's fine. You can't assume that someone's going to read all of it. So what you want to make sure that you do is capture people's attention and give the information that you want to share at every possible place in case they don't read all of it. So I see that a lot of people say, well, I put this in here, so maybe I shouldn't put it over there. Put it in both places. So that's just a side note, because I'm going to come on to talking now about the education and experience. And so these are really important sections. Don't think that if you haven't had tons and tons of work experience, you've got nothing to put on your profile. That's absolutely not the case at all. If you've had, you should list on your profile all paid and unpaid work that you have done. I'm going to come on later to talk about some of the what I call bonus sections, which are things like courses, projects, etc. in a second. So when I was working at LinkedIn as a platform was designed for people who work. So absolutely, it wasn't designed with students or graduates in mind. It wasn't. And LinkedIn realized that a long time ago. And so as we saw that our fastest growing demographic in terms of new members were students, they addressed that. And they added in all of these other sections. But don't think that you haven't got career experience if you've never had a full-time job. Nobody expects you to. So if you've done an unpaid internship, if you've done an industrial placement, if you've had a 2-week job at McDonald's, all of those things you will have gained some value from. So include them on your profile. I wouldn't necessarily be giving the same advice to somebody, I don't know, like me, who's got 20 years work experience, where I need to go back and mention absolutely everything. But in your case, if you're starting out on your career journey, include as many of those examples as you can. How I would think about writing them is this. What people want to know is, how can you take what you learnt in that job, in that placement, into another place of work? So think about the things that you learn, even if it's like, it might seem like the smallest thing. So if you observed an engineer working on something, or to use Melissa's example, she was working at Heathrow and she was able to see a plane being towed, include those very specific examples of the actual things that you did. So rather than just saying that you shadowed an engineer, actually share the examples of the things that you learned and the things that you were able to observe, because that shows to a future recruiter, employer, that actually you've been able to take that experience from that position into something else. And even if it is a 2-week job at McDonald's, you've learned customer service, you've learned teamwork, you've learned how to, interact in this environment. There is always something that you will take from these experiences. So absolutely, I would include all the different experiences that you've had. And again, to use a LinkedIn data point, LinkedIn tells us that you are 12 times more likely to be viewed if you have more than one role on your profile. So that's another good reason to try and include everything on there. And also don't forget to include obviously all of your educational experience and put a line of text in there. So many times I see people who've got their degree written on their profile, but they say nothing else. So take my nephew here again, Charlie. When he came to me before we worked on his profile together, he had done a year in Hong Kong on an exchange type of program. But he said nothing about what he'd learnt, what programs he did, what the experience was like. So we went in and added that bit of content in there, because to the point that I mentioned at the start, you want to fill the gaps in people's knowledge and understanding of who you are. You don't want any guesswork. You don't want someone to come on your profile and go, okay, so they went to Hong Kong or they did this placement, but what did they learn, or no, you need to tell people, you need to give people as much information to paint the picture. You're basically telling a story about yourself. So as much of that value that you can add, include it onto your profile. So education experience, fill it out as much as you can. One of the things that you can do, moving on to point 5 here, one of the things that you can do in experience is add rich media. So that brings me on to kind of my 5th point around what makes a really great profile. So LinkedIn, as I said at the start, is more than just a CV. It is a place where you can bring to life your personality, your skills, and a really great way of doing this is actually quite new. LinkedIn has included a couple of places, and one is almost brand new and 3 months old, this section on the profile that a lot of people don't even know is there, and it's called the featured section. And how you find this is at the top of your profile, near where your name is, under the big banner, there's a blue button and it says add profile section. And when you click that, that's the menu to all the different places on the profile where you can add content. And this is the 3rd one down in that menu, and it's new and most people haven't seen it. Melissa Ahmed's seen it. And what it can do is it allows you to add this lovely big kind of banner to the middle of your profile where you can host, like, pin content. So what it means is that you can add images, PDFs, documents, photos, videos. If you are active on LinkedIn, which I hope some of you are, and we'll talk about that in the next presentation about sharing content, you can pin posts that you may have shared on LinkedIn, or even if you've ever been brave enough, you can pin articles that you've ever written. So for example, I've come here today and I've shared a post on LinkedIn. I could pin that to my featured section so it appears front and center. So what it does is it creates a much more interesting, dynamic, creative way to present what you're all about, your skills, your experience, things that you've done in a much more interesting way than writing text. Writing 2-dimensional text, it's okay, but it's a bit, flat. And if we're talking about using your LinkedIn profile to create standout and show your personality, this is a great way to do it. So some of the things that you might want to include in this section could be your CV. For example, upload your CV, let people see it. This is, one of the things that we're all here for, is to develop our careers and ourselves. So let people see this information. You might have a portfolio or a dissertation or some sort of project from college that you want to showcase. Maybe you've got your own website for some kind of side project that you've got. Something like that. So I know there's a couple of people that I've been working with. I do some work with other universities. They've got kind of side projects as well as doing their day job. They might want to link to those. So you can have pictures. You might have some pictures of an event that you went to, or some kind of networking thing, or maybe even a charity thing that you were involved with. So any type of rich media, video obviously is fantastic. Include that in this section. And what it does is, without it, basically nothing would appear in this space. But what it does is it adds this lovely, big, creative banner right across the middle of your profile. Obviously, if you've got some nice pictures and things which are colourful and bright, it's going to add a lot more interest and more dimensions to you as a person. So I strongly encourage you to go on and maybe think about 2 or 3 things that you can add into that section, whether it's pinning a post or uploading some content. And I mentioned, as I came into this 5th and final point, from talking about the experience section before, you can actually add some of these rich media, pictures, etc., links within the experience section too. So when you go in and edit your experience section, and you might write some text about some work experience that you had, at the bottom of the editing box, there's a section that says link or media. And so you can actually add some interactive elements, some creative content pieces in there as well. So for example, if you have done work experience at a company, you could include a link to that company. And what it does is it adds a really nice thumbnail to your profile. And it just shows that you know how to use the web really thoughtfully, add some more interesting content, and it's going to create that standout perhaps from the next person who hasn't known to do that or thought to do that. So try and include these creative, these attachments, these links as much as you can in the profile. So we have covered off the main 5 kind of components of the profile that are most important to get right. Okay, if I remember these, they were pictures, so background picture and profile picture, headline, summary, experience and education, and then finally this kind of featured content, this rich media content. So there are many other sections of the profile. So to have a complete profile, there are 12 sections in total. But these, I would say, are probably the most important 5 to really, really get right. However, I said before that LinkedIn did not build the platform for students. But they realized several years ago that students were a really, really important part of our member group. So they wanted to change that. So LinkedIn made wholesale changes to the profile for students and graduates in mind, which was a pretty massive deal at the time, because what we realized was that students couldn't fill in enough of the content. So they've added all these kind of bonus sections to the profile, which can all be found in that big blue button at the top of the profile where it says add profile section. And here's, I don't know if you can see this because they come up pretty small. I tried to highlight in red some of the most important ones. So beyond experience and education, you can add in courses that you've done, projects that you've worked on, any awards that you may have been given during your time, they've used the language test scores because it's an American developed site, but any exam results or things like that you've had. I should have highlighted probably the one at the bottom there, which is just outside the red box, organizations. So basically societies. So if you've been involved in things on campus, etc., or even just afterwards. These sections were designed for you. So try and fill in as much of this content as you possibly can. Because if you don't have 5 different work experience placements, there are still loads of examples, I'm sure, of things that you've done through your education which can showcase your amazing skill set and basically show the work that you've done outside of the classroom and how that could translate into a work setting. So go and have a look at these sections, and I would encourage you to fill in as many of these as possible. Languages is in there too. So any projects that you might have collaborated on, projects, even publications. If you've worked in a science background, you may have been published. Go and have a look. There is loads in here. Your profile is not all about work. Recruiters come on. Finding the skill, I've worked with recruiters for years and years and years and years, and often I would hear them say that it's finding the skills to do the job is not necessarily the hardest thing. Finding the softer skills, the culture match, those are the hardest things. So this is a great opportunity to add all of these things into your profile. So I think we're about ready to wrap up shortly. Those were kind of my top tips. I hope they were helpful. Let's do a quick review. So these are the things that I think you should do right now. So number 1, stand out with an amazing headshot. Doesn't need to be anything professional. Get your friend to take one of you. Smile, cropped, head and shoulders, and include that on your profile. You don't have to wear a suit and tie unless that's your thing. And include a really nice, bright, vibrant background image. You can go onto Google image search. Just make sure, by the way, that when you're adding that background image, that it doesn't get in the way of your profile image. So if you've got something in there, make sure that there's nothing in the bottom left-hand corner so your profile picture isn't skewed. So get those images right, number 1. Write your own brand tagline and use that as your headline. Keyword rich. Explain what you do. Inspire others to read on. It follows you everywhere on the site. So make that tiny bit of space work really hard for you. Create a summary or about section that's like your elevator pitch. What are the things that you really need to tell somebody in 30 seconds? Past, present, and future. Number 4, include all of your work experience. Don't downplay a part-time role that you may have done for a summer a year ago. Include all of that work experience. I'm sure that you can find lessons that you've learned from all of those different things that you've done, and make sure your education is updated. Don't just put your degree in there. Explain a little bit more if you can, even in just a sentence. And the last thing is bring it all to life with rich media. Try and show your personality, include links to companies, include videos, images. There's so much content on the web that you could probably connect to from your university, from organizations you've been involved with. So bring it to life through all of that rich media. And don't forget those bonus sections. They were created for you, so use them as much as you possibly can. And that's it. So feel free to connect with me if you want to. There's some amazing, amazing women here today, and I checked out all of their profiles, and they're absolutely fantastic. So I wish you good luck, and I will be back this afternoon to talk about, right, you've had a great profile. That's going to take you half an hour to do. What do I do next? And that's what we'll cover in the next section. Thanks very much.